Okay, it's 12 noon East Coast time, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Thanks again, everyone, for joining MoCRA Achieving cGMP Compliance in Cosmetics, hosted by cGMP Consulting and amni.ai. First, some logistics for today's session. You'll see the webinar topics on the left-hand column of each slide, so you can follow along during the session. You'll be able to leverage the Q&A panel at the bottom of the Zoom screen for your questions throughout the webinar. Live attendees will be able to answer 2 poll questions during the session today. And finally, the recording will be available for all registered attendees by the end of the week. So we have 3 objectives for today's webinar. First is to understand how conducting a gap assessment benchmarks your company's current GMP framework. Second, we'll discover the typical challenges that manufacturers face in achieving cGMP compliance and the strategies to overcome them. And finally, we'll explore how software solutions can help streamline compliance processes, reduce errors, and ensure adherence to GMP regulations. Our first poll question is coming up on the screen now. So we're looking to understand for the audience, the live audience, your company type. So which company type do you represent? All right, and it looks as though we've got some even distribution between brand, contract manufacturer, and other. And then we also have some distributors as well. Thanks everyone for joining today. Now, as we continue with achieving cGMP compliance in cosmetics, I'd like to introduce our experts that will be speakers on today's session. First, we have Kevin Linde. He's the founder and CEO of cGMP Consulting. cGMP Consulting is an engineering and regulatory compliance firm providing services to FDA-regulated industries. We also have Chris Jones. He's the founder and CEO of amni.ai. Omni's EasyGMP software provides supply chain validation for FDA-regulated industries. My name is Greg Sweeney, and I will be your moderator for today's session. All right, so amni.ai and cGMP Consulting, a great partnership that helps our joint customers with their business outcomes. And in one sentence, how we help you and your company is to achieve and maintain MoCRA cGMP compliance with world-class software and services. With that, we're going to turn it over to Kevin Linde, founder and CEO of cGMP Consulting. Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for the introduction. Excuse me, I'm Kevin Linde. I'm the CEO and founder of cGMP Consulting. I've been working in FDA-regulated industries since 1996. And the company has kind of grown into different types of FDA-regulated industries. So we do a lot of drugs, and then we do some medical devices, some distributors of drugs. Supplements sort of started in the mid-2010s or something, and now MoCRA. So I think the pathway of nutritional supplements and the pathway of MoCRA will kind of follow a similar trajectory as they as the regulations roll in. I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with MoCRA, or you probably wouldn't have signed up for this seminar, but these are kind of the key provisions of the MoCRA law, and you see a few of them are in effect right now in 2024. So you probably should have a few procedures or kind of know what your obligations are for 2024. There is a 3-year average of $1 million of sales that exempts smaller companies for some of these regulations. The 2024 requirements are not that time consuming. They're not a real big effort to get in place. As we get into 2025, which is kind of the focus of this seminar, the requirements become a little more substantial, and they will require some planning and some implementation and work on your part. The first one is kind of the safety substantiation. So this is having safety data justifying each of your products that are in the market. And then the bigger one is probably good manufacturing practices. So some of you are contract manufacturers, and a lot of times some of the cosmetics are also OTC drugs. So you may be familiar with the GMPs as they apply to OTC drugs, which would put you a little bit ahead of the curve. These are things like sunscreen or acne creams and things like that. But our focus will be on what's the best way to get a compliant system that will deliver good product, will keep your regulators happy, and keep your distributors happy. So we have a client now who got in some trouble. It's a toothpaste startup, and they got pulled from Amazon, which is a big source of sales. So these are some top observations that have been compiled from 2023 and 2024. And they are common things that the FDA looks for in audits. And a lot of times suppliers, like if you are a subcontractor for a brand or something, they will follow the same regulations. We had a client and they always did well with the FDA, but when Pfizer came in, they were always super nervous because Pfizer was more picky than the FDA on some of these. A lot of these systems have to be in place, and it is this kind of development of a quality culture that is missing with some of our supplement clients, in that they know how to make things, they know how to market things. They don't have a strong quality culture to document things accurately or consistently, and that has been an issue for these companies. On this list, a lot of these functions are best handled in a software solution. Putting all your specifications into a system is a great idea. There are limits in there, batch records, releases of materials to production. Some of these things can be done in a paper-based system, but it's really hard and difficult to manage a paper-based system consistently. And it's difficult when auditors come in or potential clients come in to shuffle the papers around and show people how it works. It really works better with an electronic system. And we do have paper clients, and they do have problems finding batch records and things like that. So I think we can move on. I think the best start to a GMP production company is just doing a gap assessment of some kind. A lot of times companies will say, well, we don't need a gap assessment because we don't have anything, so we're just starting from zero. But it still pays to start with a gap assessment and then develop a plan from that, because you're in business, you have systems that are working. It's a lot of times better to kind of build out from what you currently have than to just start a totally new separate GMP system kind of on the side. The purpose of this is to identify the strengths and weaknesses, to get some face time with the companies, because that is important for project success, is to have like more of a relationship where you're like, I really care, we really have to get this person, we can't let Greg down, we have to get things going. The assessment will provide like tailored recommendations, so we'll list out what the gaps that we see are. We can list the strengths and weaknesses, and then in the gaps, we also like to categorize them based on the investment that's needed. So some things are SOP updates or things like that are relatively easy, training expansions, things like that. Other things are harder and might require capital investments and planning. So we'd like to have this. It's one of the values of the gap assessment is like, hey, this is coming for us. We don't need to do it right now, but we have this kind of roadmap that shows the things that we will need to do, where we're falling short, and then you could customize the response to fit your needs. And like the easy GMP software that Chris will talk about in the Omni section is one way that you could do this, in that there are different modules for different functions. So if you have a great inventory control function, maybe you don't need that module and your focus is more on like the quality modules or the document control modules or training modules or things like that. So yeah, it's really the best way to start off an engagement or on the way to GMP.
All right. Well, Kevin, we really great content. Really appreciate you sharing your expertise. And for our live audience, you're able to ask questions in the Q&A panel. As we continue with achieving cGMP compliance in cosmetics, we now have our second poll question for our live audience. And the question is, what's your biggest challenge in achieving MoCRA compliance? All right. And it looks as though the overwhelming answer is knowledge/expertise. Well, great news. We have two cGMP experts on the session here today, Kevin and Chris, and we're going to turn over now to Chris Jones with amni.ai.
Great. Thanks, Greg. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. So I'm Chris Jones, the CEO of Omni, and I'm very excited to discuss how MoCRA is changing the landscape of GMP compliance in the cosmetic industry. So MoCRA is essentially fundamentally shifting how we ensure product safety and quality in cosmetics. And one of the core aspects of this is ensuring a robust GMP framework. So I wanted to dive into some of the key components that will be crucial for companies in achieving MoCRA compliance. First, we have traceability, and this is essential for tracking each product throughout the entire supply chain. And this isn't just about knowing where your raw materials or finished goods are. It's about being able to trace them back quickly if something goes wrong. This level of transparency ensures that if there's ever a defect or contamination, you can immediately pinpoint the source and address the issue before it escalates. Now, closely tied to this is lot tracking. Lot tracking involves monitoring and recording specific production lots throughout the manufacturing process. This ensures that in the event of a recall or quality control issue, you can isolate the affected lot and take swift action to minimize risks and waste. It also ensures consistency across production, helping to maintain the high quality that your customers expect. So next, we have batch documentation. Comprehensive batch records are a cornerstone of compliance. These detail everything from raw materials to the finished product. These records are vital for audits, inspections, and then also internal reviews. So proper batch documentation shows that your products consistently meet safety and quality standards. And under MoCRA, this documentation is going to be heavily scrutinized. Personnel and training is another critical element. It's essential that all staff involved in production are adequately trained and qualified to perform their roles. Training must be documented, and personnel must understand the GMP requirements to ensure that every step in production is compliant. The other one that we have is laboratory and production controls. So having standardized processes and testing procedures is just non-negotiable for cGMP, and then also just MoCRA as well. Ensuring that your laboratory and production facilities follow these controlled standards helps prevent variability in product quality and also ensures that each batch meets the required specifications. Now, finally, cGMPs emphasize the importance of complaints, adverse events, and also recalls. Having robust protocols for reporting, investigating, and resolving product issues is going to be crucial for this. The quicker you can address complaints and adverse events, the better you can protect both your customers and also your brand. Altogether, these components form the backbone of a strong GMP framework under MoCRA. And it's not just about meeting the regulatory requirements, it's about building trust with your customers and ensuring safety, quality, and consistency across your products. So now let's talk about some of the common compliance challenges companies will face under MoCRA. While the framework is pretty comprehensive, its implementation comes with its own set of challenges. One of the major challenges is going to be a lack of standardized documentation. Without clear, organized system, maintaining consistent quality and regulatory compliance will become a significant hurdle. This issue is more pronounced in smaller companies that may lack the resources or expertise to implement and manage GMP standards effectively. And this is a great spot where cGMP consulting can come in and help you guys out with that knowledge and expertise as well. Also, inconsistent documentation can lead to gaps in compliance, making it difficult to prove that all necessary steps were taken to ensure product safety. This not only risks non-compliance, but also makes it challenging to trace issues back to their source in the event of a recall. Another common problem is poor inventory management. Inaccurate tracking of raw materials and finished products can lead to subpar product releases, which affect not only quality, but also your ability to comply with MoCRA. Poor inventory management can result in expired or contaminated materials being used in production, which is a direct threat to product safety. Additionally, without proper tracking, it becomes challenging to maintain the right balance of stock. This leads to either excess inventory, which can tie up capital, or stockouts, which will disrupt production and delay product launches or even shipments. Additionally, there's a significant gap in regulatory knowledge, and this is even common among industry veterans. This lack of understanding, it can lead to non-compliance, which results in penalties, warning letters, or something even worse. And then, companies may assume that their existing practices are sufficient, but they just fall short of MoCRA's stricter requirements when these regulations do take place. So it's good to start early and often with these things. So stay up to date with the regulatory changes and ensure that your team is fully trained on current cGMP standards is going to be critical for avoiding these pitfalls. Now, finally, there's the issue of actually implementing SOPs. It's one thing to have them in place, but it's another thing entirely to ensure that they're followed rigorously. And SOPs are the backbone of a consistent and reliable manufacturing process. But if they're not adhered to, they can render basically everything ineffective what you're doing. So regular training, audits, process validation, those are going to be essential for ensuring that SOPs are followed correctly. Inadequate testing substantiation, missed approvals are also areas where companies frequently fall short, putting them at risk of non-compliance. Ensuring that testing procedures are properly validated and that all necessary approvals are documented is critical to maintaining compliance and ensuring that your products meet the required safety and quality standards. All right, so now that we discussed the challenges, let's explore how software and automation can address these issues within the framework of MoCRA compliance. So one of the significant advantages of using software is its ability to integrate various aspects of manufacturing, all the way from raw material procurement to final product distribution, all while ensuring compliance with cGMP standards. This integration streamlines documentation and record keeping, which is essential for meeting MoCRA's requirements. Instead of maintaining separate systems for different aspects of production, certain software systems can centralize all information, making it easier to track and manage. Another key feature of these systems is the ability to enhance safety substantiation. By incorporating GMP guidelines directly into your manufacturing processes, these systems help ensure that all procedures are followed correctly and testing results are thoroughly documented and validated. This not only supports compliance, but it also enhances overall product safety and quality. Real-time monitoring is another critical component of these software systems. With real-time data, companies can continuously monitor their operations, identifying and addressing potential compliance issues before they escalate. This proactive approach helps ensure that all processes remain aligned with MoCRA's requirements, reducing the risk of non-compliance and improving operational efficiency. Now, overall, the integration of a robust compliance-based software system into your operations can provide substantial benefits in maintaining the complexities of MoCRA requirements. By centralizing and automating key processes, companies can maintain higher standards of quality and safety while navigating the evolving regulatory landscape. So for example, our platform, cGMP, it's designed to help streamline these processes. It's built on a GMP framework, and it simplifies compliance by centralizing documentation, automating key tasks, and providing real-time monitoring. Now, while it's tailored to meet specific needs of FDA-regulated industries, it offers the flexibility to scale and adapt as regulatory requirements evolve, helping companies stay ahead of compliance challenges without adding unnecessary complexity to their operations. And that's all I have, so I'll hand it back over to you, Greg. Thank you.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you, Chris, for the excellent content and for sharing your expertise today. As we continue with MoCRA, achieving cGMP compliance in cosmetics, we're now at the time to take your questions. And so you can leverage the Q&A button in the bottom of the Zoom panel. And it looks as though our first question is about GMPs. So let me read this. Why should we start thinking about the MoCRA GMPs now? Kevin, would you like to address that?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Yeah, I think that it's part of the biggest thing is to build a quality culture, to understand what these are, why they exist, why you should do them. I've become a big believer that the process does work. It's a more documentation heavy process than a lot of businesses are used to. But it takes time to get the procedures developed, to start using the procedures, have it work right. And it's best to start the journey earlier and grow slower. We had one client and they were approving all their documents on a Friday, and then the auditor was coming in on Tuesday. So the auditor then came in on Tuesday, and the new documents were okay, but they're like, well, show me the records. And the records were on the old documents, and then the old documents were messy. And it's really just better to start now and have a plan and build out something more stable than it is to sprint for the finish line, at the last minute.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Kevin, for sharing that perspective. Our next question is regarding deploying software. So how long does it take to deploy cGMP? What size companies are the best fit? Chris, it's probably a good question for you.
Sure thing. Yeah. So cGMP is designed from your small manufacturer all the way up to kind of enterprise size as well. And it's really built around the GMP framework. So if you're already following some semblance of that, it really depends on how dedicated you are and the timeframes that you want to get it implemented in. And we've seen implementations as little as 6 weeks and then up to, a few months to get things rolling. But our goal with it is to really not disrupt the workflow too much. Like Kevin talked about earlier, paper-based systems can cause a lot of problems, and cGMP is designed to really fit into your workflow without causing a lot of change.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris, for sharing your perspective there. Next question we have is, what are the benefits to having a third party develop our standard operating procedures? Maybe, Kevin, you can start with that, and Chris, you can add some commentary.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Yeah, I think that the benefits of having a third party help with SOPs is you're going to get the industry standard SOPs with the background and the development and justifications in the SOPs. You can read the regulations as well, but it's a little bit, they're generally written kind of open-ended, and it's up to you to justify why what you're doing is acceptable. So the benefits are you get the industry standard, best practices. You'd start from a template. You could ask questions and help develop. We've done it both ways, where clients have worked and then sent us a draft to review, and other ones where we've kind of customized a template. It's usually faster and less frustrating if you kind of start from something. Has been my experience.
Yeah, one thing I'll add too is that it's just easier to have a third party do it, especially if that third party has seen hundreds of other manufacturers and their best practices as well. So they just have that knowledge that they can use to apply to your organization as well.
Excellent. Thank you,
Yeah.
Kevin and Chris, for sharing that perspective. Here's a good one here. What are your top recommendations to successfully drive behavioral adaptation of all these new MoCRA policies?
I can start with that.
Yeah, you can start, Chris. Yeah.
Sure. So kind of just echoing what you said earlier, Kevin, start early and often. We know that it's going to be very similar to kind of the GMP framework that we outlined already. We don't know what the exact ruling is, but get your employees, used to that framework, make sure there's no surprises when these regulations come around. Just hit the ground running. That's really it.
Yeah, that's great, Chris. I would add that when you put the systems in place, like it's always good to work with them for some time, and they're in place for a reason. Like, for example, the qualification of suppliers. That's always a common observation. Companies, a lot of times, smaller companies, they'll find a product that they think fits the specs and they'll start ordering it and start using it. But they won't really do the background on the supplier or have a contract with the supplier or assess the risk of the supplier. And, in my career, I've seen a number of failures where the supplier is actually a distributor and they switched manufacturing plants, and then the quality of the stuff that they get in is different, and then which results in a failure of the final product. And just sometimes minor changes in processing can ruin the final product, and that's like an example of one thing that is required in the GMPs. A lot of smaller companies, startups don't do it. There's a reason that it's done, and it's kind of good to start with it.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin and Chris, for that expertise. All right, we have a bunch more questions here. So here's what I think we should do. Can we go to the last slide? Because we probably have time to get through 2 questions. But if we don't get to your question, or if you want to drill into any of this, you can message either Kevin or Chris on the emails on the screen, info@cgmpconsulting.com, and Chris at hello@amni.ai. Let's see if we can get through 2 more, though. The next one we have is, can easy GMP work with ERP systems? Chris, you want to take?
Yep, quick answer, yes. We're very focused on integrating with other software applications. So we already have several pre-built APIs. If there's one that we don't have, we can easily build it. So answer is yes.
Great. And then I think we have time for one more. The slide that lists FDA observations has listed number 1 is identify specifications for each component not established. Does it mean we need to have a specification document for each finished goods that we manufacture? Kevin, is that something you could
Yes. Yeah, it means, so that observation was actually for the incoming materials. So you need starch in your product. You buy starch from the supplier, but you should have a spec that says the starch that we use is of this quality and has, no contaminants down to this level. And then you can use different suppliers. And when you accept it in, you say, this is my spec. This is what we got in. They matched. It's released. So that's a module in easy GMP, and it's a pretty standard process. And then the same for finished products. So your finished product spec will be whatever is defined, whatever's critical for you. The viscosity is right, the smell is right, the color is right, there's no microbial contamination or something like that. So you have a release spec for, the hand cream or whatever you're making here. And then each lot you check and say, hey, the spec says it has these 4 things. We have these 4 things. We're met. Check, 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 released. And then if there is a problem, you could come back and say, well, this lot looks like it was contaminated. We got a contaminated sample back. And then you can look and say, well, it passed release. Maybe the end user contaminated it accidentally or things like that. But yeah, you would need a spec a release spec for finished products.
Yep.
Well, Kevin and Chris, this has just been such an excellent session. We want to thank everyone for attending MoCRA, Achieving cGMP Compliance in Cosmetics, hosted by cGMP Consulting and amni.ai. If you have further questions, please connect with Kevin and Chris via the emails on the screen. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.